Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendan Traxler.
The 21st century, mankind has colonized the last unexplored region on Earth, the ocean. As captain of the Sequest and its crew, we are its guardians, for beneath the surface lies the future.
Hey everybody, it is Adam Jewell with the Colonize the Ocean podcast, and that was my good friend and co-host Brendan Traxler. Brendan, how are you doing today?
I am awesome. How are you?
Oh, like I've said before, the climate difference between you and me is quite significant, but other than that, I'm living.
Right on.
So tell me about that little quote that you threw at the beginning.
Well, I think a lot of people already recognize that as being the intro to Sequest DSV, a pop culture show back in the 90s. It was a awesome show, probably one of my favorites. But it was all based around a massive submarine, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. But side note to that, I would love to do an episode all about Sequest sometime, or just pop culture in general, but specifically Sequest because, like I said, it's like one of my favorite shows. It's awesome.
Now, I know that you're a big sci-fi nerd, and you like Star Wars, you like Star Trek, you like Sequest. Now, where do you rank those three? Like out of those three, I'm going to take Star Wars out of it because that's more of a movie series, but like...
Well, so Star Trek.
But it had a different series of shows. So which one was...
Star Wars isn't sci-fi anyway, it's fantasy.
Oh, okay. Sorry that you wanted to get all technical about it. What do you like more, Sequest or Star Trek? Just answer the question.
Well, I mean, that's hard to say. The thing with Star Trek is they're still making them. So, I mean, it keeps updated and above the times. Whereas with Sequest, I mean, most of it should be happening what is modern day. So it's kind of dating itself already. But from the basis, and even Sequest was kind of based off of a earlier show back in, was it the 60s, I think it was, Seaview. So, I don't know, but I can't. Sequest holds a special place in my heart. I'll just put it that way.
All right, well, let's dive into this. So you said we're talking about the different types of sandwiches we like, and submarine is one of them.
Yes, I mean, whatever.
Let's talk about subs. More so, I bet we're gonna get into like personal submersible machines and mechanisms and all that.
Yeah, well, when I was doing when I started doing the notes and stuff and doing a little bit of research on this, it became apparent that since the earliest depiction of submarines starts back in the 16th century, we had several centuries of notes to go through. And since most of the topics we covered have only been around about 50 years, trying to cover 400 years of history was going to take a long time. So I said, let's just skip forward to pertinent information and discuss modern day submarines and just really go from there. When people are talking about submarines, often a lot of people, the first thing I think of is the naval submarines from around the world. And really, when you start thinking about naval submarines, they are mobile underwater habitats. They produce their own oxygen and water. They produce their own power because most of them are nuclear generated. They can go for months at a time. And the only thing that stops them is the ability to hold and maintain food. So, I mean, really, when you get thinking about it, if you had the money to go get an old nuclear sub and convert it to an underwater habitat, you could do that. I mean, the private renovation costs and the fact there are no windows and stuff along those lines, so you have to run your renovation and stuff. It probably costs you more in the long run than just building your own habitat. But that being said, the technology in one of them is pretty much what you need to have an underwater habitat.
Well, and I can't imagine that buying a nuclear submarine is easy to do, if at all possible.
I mean, I know that you used to be able to buy diesel submarines from like Russia and stuff along those lines, but yeah, nuclear probably not. But still, same basic principle. Though, I guess if you retrofitted the diesel to like electric or something along those lines, it might still work. But I think we're missing the point at this point in time.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we're going to be talking more so about, the kind of like the future and I guess the technology of submarines. And like you were saying, when it comes to like the military grade submarines, one of the interesting facts about the military grade submarines that I've recently learned about, because one thing about this podcast is you're the brains and I just try to help move along the thing. I have the romantic voice that everybody loves, but you're more so got all the information. But I did learn something that, military submarines is that most nations that, are coastal nations, that have access to bodies of water have nuclear powered submarines with ballistic capabilities, mainly to deter from nuclear war and all that, because most of them are so stealthy that they don't even recognize when there is another submarine literally feet from them. Back in I think it was like 2012 or so, not too long ago, a UK sub and a French submarine actually bumped into each other because their technology allows them to be so stealthy that they physically don't even know they're right next to each other. But it's just really interesting, and like the need that a lot of major countries feel they need to have for nuclear submarines and ballistic type submarines. Now, granted, a guy like you and I, we're not going to be getting any of those, and I mean, I hope that's not what our goal is, but just the sheer power that these things have and the technology that surrounds them is just fascinating, and what a lot of people are trying to transfer to a more personal basis, like the stuff that we're really interested in.
Yeah, I don't really foresee a need for a nuclear submarine or anything that stealthy. But you never know what the future holds. But as of right now, yeah, you're right. Let's just focus on personal submarines and stuff that's a little bit more tangible to the modern man. So when you start talking about personal subs, you can break it down into different categories. You've got a lot of people are familiar with tourist submarines. They can have anywhere from 6 to 50 passengers on it, and it's more like an underwater bus. You see them in different resort areas where people can get on and go see coral reefs. They putt around underwater, and personally, I just think they're really cool. I've always, even years back when I was first starting to design Atlantic Sea Colony and looking at it, I've always envisioned on getting one of these tourist submarines. There's websites where you need, I'm not sure some people know this, but there's websites you can go on and you can buy old used ones that maybe need some work or something along those lines, but they're still not cheap. But either way, retrofitting one of those for a shuttle that would, take the people from the land and shuttle down and dock with an underwater habitat, underwater hotel or colony or whatever. So that was kind of with the tourist submarines. My first foray into them was these bigger tourist submarines. But then there are some smaller 2 or 3 person submarines that are touristy as well. They're just a little more personal, like the 101. And there's several companies out there that do that. They're a little bit more because they cater to a person who can purchase a $1 million submarine. Deep Flight's one of the companies. Triton Subs, U-Boat Works, Sea Imagine. There's several of them out there that do this type of thing.
Yeah, and just like with a lot of what we talk about when we talk about underwater habitats, when we talk about seasteading, when we talk about submersibles, people see a price tag on a lot of this stuff, and they, it just shocks them on like how spendy certain things can be. Like, I'm sure, getting on a tourism aspect where, you can go on a little excursion with one of these things isn't all that bad. But like, if you say you wanted to buy one for yourself, you're talking a lot of money. But me coming from a manufacturing background, people have to understand that as of right now, I mean, there's not a huge demand for every single person to own a personal submarine, just like like most people own vehicles or cars, trucks, whatever. Not everybody is going to need a personal submarine. So manufacturing wise, it's a supply and demand type thing. But as more people get into this kind of thing, and as like what we foresee our future being, there's going to be a lot more affordable options. And where there's a demand and where there's creative people come up with innovative ways to build just about anything at a affordable rate too. I mean, we're seeing that with all kinds of things. You know, you never would have expected a electric car, kind of like what Tesla's doing, to be at the price they're at now, where, you know, years ago you would have thought these would have been like hundreds of thousands of dollars and never came down. Now they're getting down to a price where people can, you know, an average Joe could go out and get one. So I foresee the same thing happening with these personal submarines, and I think you would agree with me on that.
Yeah, you know, you want to use Tesla as an example. I mean, that's basically Elon Musk's whole philosophy on the whole thing was to come out with the very first Roadster, which was a low quantity, high price car, and slowly they came out with the Model S, which was still expensive but was available to the masses and so forth. Now we got the Model 3 out. We're getting ready to launch more and more cars, and the price points coming down and down with each one as you know the manufacturing costs were recouped up front because there's a low, like you said, it was a supply and demand type of thing. So yeah, I totally agree. And you know, with that becomes more and more variance as well as you start getting more and more quantity out there of anything. You're going to start wanting people want different flavors of whatever it is. And you know, I think we kind of see that right now with that the technology has already come so far in submarines, and the information is so plentiful out there, especially with the advent of the internet, that you have people building their own submarines. I mean, this has been the case for pretty much ever, that people, there's been tinkerers and engineers who have built their own, but you know, now with Facebook and YouTube and different platforms, you've got companies like Hypersub or Sea Breacher that they're, you know, blurring the lines of what is a boat or a watercraft and a submarine and trying to bring this personal sub to the masses, I guess.
Yeah, and one of the cool things that I've seen with, like you just said, there's a lot of these manufacturers that are creating where you can use it as a boat, or you can use it as a personal sub where it has, you know, it's multifunction. And is what a lot of them are doing is where they function power wise either solely electric, or there's a lot of them that take that same kind of concept from diesel submarines, where they, you know, use the diesel part, you know, above water that charges the batteries, and then when they're submerged, the motors run purely off of the electric batteries that are in them. And more of them are trying to, you know, convert solely to electric, just because obviously you want to have less, I guess you want to have less fluids inside of a machine that you're, you know, putting in the water. That's one of the things you and I are big on with a lot of this stuff, is that when we start interacting more with the ocean and, you know, becoming more a part of it, that we don't want to be pollutants and we don't want to damage anything while we're there. So yeah, a lot of these guys being very innovative with what they're doing. And like you said, a lot of guys right out of their, you know, garages or their little shops are building their own. And to me, that's what's going to make all this come together and be a huge deal, because there's going to be a bunch of people that have their own ideas. Someone's going to put together one really good one, make it affordable, make it to where everybody can use it and it's safe. And just, I don't know, that's the kind of thing that always interests me about anything technological, is just watching that one guy in that one shop build something awesome and watch it take off.
Yeah. You know, talking about the diesel to electric, you know, I think that another reason also is obviously with diesel requires oxygen, and oxygen is scarce underwater. So the more you can run off of, you know, electric, the longer you can stay down because it doesn't require oxygen. So as battery technology gets better and better, and you can stay down longer and longer off of electric battery, you know, the better it is too. So there is that comes into play as well.
So we're, you know, with the Colonize the Ocean podcast, we talked about how we want to talk about all things oceanic and technology that's related to that. So Brennan, tell me why exactly we're taking some time to focus on submersibles and personal submarines, and yeah, why are we exploring that topic this week?
I mean, they're cool. I mean, they are.
Reason number one.
Okay, yeah, they're cool. No, but I mean, I think there's a bunch that you can break. Once again, you can break it down into a bunch of different areas. You know, the underwater exploration aspect is, you know, one of the driving forces behind underwater colonization is being under the water, being able to observe what's going on, just to be submerged in it. And that's kind of what a big portion of submarines is for, is the exploration of the oceans. And currently, if you're really going to go deep, you're going to be in a closed, compact bubble attached to some weights and some motors, diving underwater to see what's down there. So maybe it's a stretch, but it's, as you see as we go down here, why submarines and this all come into play. Another word is the technology that submarines use. And like I said earlier, with the Navy submarines, basically they are mobile underwater habitats. So, the recycling of oxygen, in some cases, generation of oxygen, the pressures, all those type of things are things that we will have to implement into underwater colonies that submarines have been battling for decades, even hundreds of years, and have learned, tricks and what works and what doesn't work. And we can borrow a lot from them, I guess. And last, we kind of hinted on a little earlier as well, was the transportation aspect of the whole thing. Whereas right now, they're great for sightseeing and tourism and exploration, but let's talk a little bit about the future and what that's going to be. And as you were talking about, as more and more get out there, what's it going to happen? And, personally, my problem right now is I like speed. I've always had faster cars in the past. I've gotten lots of trouble with that. Plenty of tickets over the year. And so my whole thing is none of them are fast, all things considered. Yeah, because most of them are run by propeller, and propellers can only push water so fast before it starts burning the water. So you're limited on that. But as more and more people opens up, you're going to want people. I think people are going to want, for a better term, like an underwater race car type of thing. So technology is going to have to change to whatever that may be. So I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, and with what you're saying I think it's important to note that a lot of these hybrid submarines where we were talking about, they're both like, they can be used as boats and submersibles. I think it's important to note that a lot of them are very fast on the surface. It's a matter of, like you said, once it gets underwater, it switches over to the electric propellers and therefore going a little bit slower. One of the things that I worry about, and I'm sure a lot of the developers are worried about, is, you have these big open propellers and, going too fast, visibility underwater, and making sure, like, if you're cruising at a pretty solid pace, that you don't hit something and endanger yourself, but at the same time not hitting marine life or coral or whatever it is and damaging that too. So once again, how I said before, I'm a huge fan of innovation. I'm excited to see what developers will do in order to produce a efficient and, I guess, speedy type submersible for underwater consumption by people.
Yeah, I can see that. We talk about speed, and there are technologies out there. Some of you may be familiar with supercavitation.
I'm not, so I sure hope you plan on explaining that.
Oh, I would love to. Now, basically what supercavitation is it's been around in torpedo technology for a little while now. It's not used day to day, but it's been experimented with. And basically what it does is, we'll use a torpedo for example, but it creates a gas bubble around the torpedo, because the problem with water is it's so much thicker than air, so it creates so much more power to push through it. So that's another reason why you can't get a lot of speed, because the amount of power it takes to push through the water is so much greater than on air. So if the whole thing is you create a gas bubble around the torpedo in this case, it's then pretty much flying through air underwater. So because of that, you can get a torpedo or a submarine or whatever up to much faster speeds. So far, obviously it's all hearsay and what the different governments have claimed, but several hundreds of miles an hour speeds underwater, just flying through, literally flying underwater. The problem with that, last thing I heard, was maneuverability, because you can't turn on a dime because you're in a gas bubble. Once again, you have to create this gas bubble, so that it's complicated. And that's why it's still kind of experimental. But it's one of the, in my opinion, it's one of the cooler ones, just because of what it does. Another type of propulsion that's been messed around with and tested for years was magnetohydrodynamics. which basically uses magnetism to move water. It's there's no moving parts to it, so that it's from that standpoint it's a whole lot easier than supercavitation, but again it requires a lot of energy. And so far everything I've seen out of it, you don't get high speeds out of it. It's a decent propulsion, different types of propulsion, but you're not going to get high speeds out of it, at least not as of yet, without a huge amount of energy going into it. And then, once again, who knows what other future techs may come out to play, whether it's mimicking a fish with laminar flow, which is another, I think I pronounced that correctly, which is the way like a shark or fish moves their back, their tail. It creates the flow that comes off of that to propulse it, move it forward, is called laminar flow. So whether you can mimic that or what other aspects of nature they might be able to incorporate into submarines, or who knows what else. Maybe it's UFO tech. I don't know. But that being said, that's kind of our futurism that we're going to talk about as far as that goes.
Yeah, and we keep saying this over and over, but the more that people are involved in underwater, exploration, underwater technology, underwater colonization, whatever it may be, the more we're going to be able to figure out. When you only have a small group of people, working on these technologies, the development doesn't come out as fast. So, one of our missions with Colonize the Ocean, the podcast, and with our Atlantis Sea Colony project is just to get people interested in the underwater technology and just trying to get more people, promoting it and getting more technology advancements and just, whatever we can do to make things easier and safer and more efficient for underwater exploration.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast, was because when I started looking around, there's several podcasts on like scuba diving and good diving space, but there was nothing really that at least I could find really diving into the tech of underwater, and especially when it came to colonizing the ocean. The only closest thing was the seasteading podcast, and it hadn't done anything for quite a while, and they started up right around the same time that we started talking about doing our podcast too. So I mean, it's great that there's another one out there doing it, but what differentiates us is we're talking about literally anything that deals with ocean tech. So I'm definitely not an expert at podcasts, but I saw a need there, and that's why I'm so grateful to have you, Adam, because you have done podcasts before, and you can help corral this all together, and we can get this information out there and create a place where people can come and hopefully get a little bit of information out there, and we can get different people on the podcast to be talking about different areas they're experts in, or they have knowledge in, or have been part of too.
Earlier we were talking about, we mentioned a couple times that, especially with naval submarines, obviously they're submerged underwater habitats. So there's a lot that we can learn just from submarines when it comes to habitation and being able to live underwater. I guess I have a question for you, Brendan. One thing that will separate us from, well, I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that separate us from a military submarine, but one of the similarities is that we're going to be underwater, and we could, depending on the person, we could be there for a long time, except for ours is going to be voluntary. You're not going to be required to stay underwater, not at our places anyways. But one of the things they say they have issues with, and that I found interesting, and I'm going to go on a tangent, so hold on for a second, because
Okay.
when a crew is on a submarine, they're usually there for 77 days, and very infrequently do they get communication, because it's hard for, if they're submerged, it's hard for them to get information. So a lot of times, like, they don't get letters and emails and stuff like that very often, except for when they surface and they can catch a signal and all that. And one of the interesting things that I read is, like, when they do get emails and stuff, it has to be scanned before it gets to the crewman, because, say for example, a loved one passed away and that email was, or that information was sent to someone on the submarine, they're not going to tell that person, because they don't want that to mess the morale of someone on a submarine. So I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting, and like, you have to, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, be able to deal with no communication, close quarters, and just really being isolated for long periods of time. So what would you take as stuff that would benefit us from that kind of situation, but what would we drastically do different?
Yeah, to that point, I mean, even recently in our comments on the Atlanta Sea Colony Facebook page, we had somebody bring up that exact point as far as the psychological aspects of being confined to an underwater habitat, and that was partially, Cousteau and the others back in the '60s. That's part of the thing they were experimenting was how humans adapted to basically being trapped more or less in an underwater habitat for periods of time. There's always communication, unlike with where you just pick up a phone and you can call up the land or whatever. And especially now with the internet, you got video chat and all that kind of thing. So it brings the outside world a little bit closer, which I think definitely helps a lot. But at the same time, one of the keys is going to the ability to come and go as you please is going to be key, or at least as on a regular schedule. So anything that we can do to make sure that people don't feel trapped and feel like there's no hope, because I mean, you got claustrophobia, you've got a plethora of different areas, psychological aspects that could come into play. And when you get underwater, just the fact that there's a bunch of water above you messes with people. So it's one of the things that has to be monitored, and it'll be curious. It's going to be a curious thing to see how people adapt over time as underwater habitats become more modern place and people start visiting them, maybe just to spend a night as in a vacation or a getaway type of thing. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, and one that there isn't a true answer to yet, just because everybody's different.
Well, and here's the thing is, you are self-admittedly a lot more introverted than I am. So how long do you think you could be isolated, like in an underwater habitat?
I mean, as long as I got like internet and stuff like that, I mean, I could go a long time. I mean, I could stick in an order for quite a while. As long as I had a steady flow of food and internet, I don't know. I really don't. Even at that, I mean, I think everybody needs some level of human interaction every once in a while.
Right.
So once again, it's one of those things where knowing that I could come to the surface or people come visit would be okay too. But with me, I'd rather go to the surface so I can escape back to my underwater habitat when I wanted to. But
well, then you have to give away where you're at and all that.
But yeah, that's a topic for another time. My hermit underwater habitat somewhere. But yeah, I really don't know. Definitely. I mean, a week would be totally easy. I could do it with no problem. I don't know if I could do a whole month or not, but
we're gonna find out one day.
I'm up for the challenge.
Well, and we don't want to. I mean, we already kind of have diverted from the submarine topic, but let's end on the submarine topic. Where, do you think that you and I could go like tour a submarine somewhere? Do you think there's somewhere that you can, even if it's like surfaced? I'm not saying like they'd let us go on like an excursion for 2 months or whatever, but like, do you think there's a place where we could go tour one? That way we can kind of get a feel for like how they do things, so we can kind of,
are you talking like Navy
technology?
Are you talking Navy or are you talking personal?
Navy.
I don't know, but maybe we got somebody out there listening that can get us hooked up or something like that.
Yeah, if we could go like just, I mean, Tanker. They do it for some people. I mean, we got to be special enough to do it.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, I mean, I know the personal ones. I mean, whatever, you can go different places and check those out. Take a ride on one. I mean, those are plentiful. You can go lots of different places and get on a personal one or a tourist sub or whatever.
See, and that's the thing. That's why this is like such an important topic to us, is because the tourism ones and the personal ones, that's going to be beneficial for our projects, because, you're going to need that piece of equipment to get to and from. Well, you don't need it, but you're going to want your own submersible craft to get to and from your underwater habitat, where as like the Navy submarines, like you said, there's so much we could learn about being able to kind of live off the grid and the technology that it takes to do it. So, there's just a lot that we can learn from this and see the, hope to see the future in all this.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'll play devil's advocate here a little bit and say that, I think that we don't necessarily need to tour a submarine to get that, where we've got, a lot of people that we can contact, or we know that, we got a bunch of people that follow us or that probably listen to this podcast that has that knowledge already.
I don't appreciate you telling me what I need, because I kind of do want to tour one, because
Well,
being able to see it firsthand sparks my creativity.
well, I apologize then for stomping your dreams there. But what I'm saying is, fine, we can go tour a submarine. But I'm saying also, if in the event that we cannot, I'm sure that we have people who have served time on one, or worked on them or whatever, that would be more than willing to share their information with us.
Well, I think on that note, Brendan, we can bring this one to a close and be able to tell people that if they want to keep following us, they can find us on all the social medias at Atlantis Sea Colony, or they can go to our website, colonizetheocean.com or atlantisseacolony.com. Brendan, do you have any parting words that you want to give with these fine folks that have been listening to us?
No, I think the only thing that, I want to reiterate is that, we are always looking for people to help us out. If you or somebody is involved in any of the fields that we discuss, please let us know by reaching out to us on the socials, as Adam just said. And we can talk about maybe getting you on the podcast, and we can let you enlighten us in things that we maybe don't know.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to put our foot in our mouth on any subjects or try to spew information that we're getting incorrect. So yeah, I agree 110% that anybody that has an expertise in any type of aquatic technology field, please reach out to us. If you want to criticize us, that's fine. We want to learn. If you want to, come on our show, come on our show. Doesn't matter. But with that, Brendan, anything else?
Nope. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you in another 2 weeks, and we've got some good stuff coming. Tune in then. Thank you.